Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turn the Page. We're so happy to have you today. I am Jen, and I am here with my co-host. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jessica. I am Jen's co-host today from Syosset Public Library. How are you?
Syosset Public Library, and we are so excited to be here with the two creators of a fantastic, let's call it like a transmedia phenomenon at this point. It was a podcast, now it's a book, and it is moving into other media as well. Could I ask you to introduce yourselves and your book, please?
Yes, of course. By the way, I like the term transmedia. We haven't used that one yet, but I'll keep that in the pocket. But I'm Jake Emanuel. I'm a writer, a screenwriter, and the co-creator of The Edge of Sleep.
And I'm Willie Block, the other co-creator of the transmedia phenomenon known as The Edge of Sleep.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. And I would love to know how you started collaborating. Like, where did you meet? You talked a little bit about it before the show, but talk about where you met and where this idea came from, how you got into this project.
Wow, that could be a very long story or a very short one, depending on how much time we want to go. But for the sake of brevity and the listeners, I'll try to give the 2-minute summary. But we both, met at Emerson College, and we started making short films together. And we both decided to try writing together as screenwriters, and we spent various years with some on and off success. As you know, there's like a shakeup in the screenwriting industry with the WJ being on strike, and in the beginning of our screenwriting careers, we spent a lot of our time in the term is called development hell. Writing movies and TV shows forever and ever and ever that don't seem to go anywhere, with a couple mini breakthroughs. But in 2019, we had the opportunity to work in the format where we call podcasts or audio dramas, and it was with this newfound company called Q Code that really only wanted to focus at the time on truly immersive audio dramas, meaning you take actors from TV and movies, and then you create stories where you have the highest quality of sound design, and you hire movie composers to truly create sort of very immersive audio experiences. And that was sort of the opportunity that first led to The Edge of Sleep. And so as far as the idea is concerned,
should I talk about it?
Yeah, you're allowed. Cut me off.
No problem.
No, turn off his. I'm just kidding.
So, Q Code was actually founded by one of our ex-agents, a guy called Rob Herding, who is definitely one of our good friends, and he was founding this company. And as Jake said, we had been a little frustrated with the way Hollywood functions, where you work and work and work, and things like. The means of production is like, it's very slow, like walk up that mountain. And what excited us about doing an audio drama for them was it was very clear, like, that they were going to make a bunch of them very quickly, or as quickly as they could. So we had a meeting with them, and Rob introduced us to Mark Fishbach, who is a big YouTube influencer that goes by the name Markiplier. And they were looking to do an idea surrounding him. And so Jake and I looked around basically some of the stuff that he created. And we noticed that like a lot of the videos he was posting had to do with him playing horror video games. So in that ilk, we basically pitched, just like the one line of like, what if, you were in a world where, if you fall asleep, you die. And, we also noticed that a lot of Mark's fan base was a little bit younger, and maybe like hadn't seen, Nightmare on Elm Street, or like maybe hadn't like, wasn't super into like Stephen King, so, or hadn't seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which are some of the big influences on us when we were creating it, and thought that this was like a really good opportunity to show them what one of these stories is like. And we just kind of took the ball and ran with it.
Yeah, and just to jump off Willie, like our background is movie and TVs. We went to film school together. We fell in love with the same filmmakers and screenwriters, and like working with Mark opened up sort of this other world that we didn't really know existed. And what was interesting about some of the artists that he was showcasing on his channel is they were like truly interesting, innovative indie video game designers. And so we knew there was this relationship with his audience in horror. And then, we were like, well, we're going to sort of create a story based on the horror we love, and as Willie said, it's Stephen King, David Cronenberg, some of our other influences from the film world, David Lynch, Werner Herzog, and
Joe Dante.
And, one of the things we had never written an audio drama before when we started. And we saw that there were really interesting opportunities where you could express some of your ideas in a very big, ambitious ways. Like the good thing about soundscapes is that they all cost the same. So if we wanted to do a sequence under the ocean or on an airplane or in a dream, the only barriers you have is just what is capable in sound design, which is everything. But at the same time, we had the understanding that if you have many people talking at once, it gets very confusing. So if you design a scene and it's 4 or 5 Wall Street bros talking over lunch, you might sort of lose the ability to know who's who. But if you do like a road trip and it's mom, dad, brother, sister talking in the car, that's very easy to follow. So we knew we had to have very vibrant, vivacious characters. It had to be a small group of characters. So we kind of discovered as we went along that audio dramas were as a medium, it could be very epic, but also had to be intimate at the same time.
When you're talking, it also kind of makes me think a little bit just about just the days of, War of the Worlds. And when that's one of the things I really love about, audio drama podcasts. And especially when I started hearing about them, I'm like, it kind of just brings entertainment to this full circle media, where like people would listen to these audio dramas. And I just kind of love that whole aspect of it. Yeah, and I like that how you talk about it from a filmmaker's perspective. It's super, super cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is we really when we wrote the podcast and when we were creating the podcast, we really, I think the bad way to always do something is to hope it becomes a TV show or hope it becomes a movie, and really try to make it special and specific for the medium you're working in. And every scene, every episode, we were like, how does this benefit to be in the world of audio? And, I think that one thing with horror is, as we've gotten into our, later 30s, as opposed to when we were young and we liked much more gory movies. Willie's a dad now. We've gotten more sensitive, like, for example, we're like, one scene in episode 3 is an autopsy. And actually, we think that if you saw it, it would have kind of dipped into maybe being gratuitous and a little bit too gory. But actually, just hearing it happen strikes like an amazing balance, and the listener just kind of gets to build it in their head. So those are kind of the things we would think about constantly as we went through the scripts scene by scene.
Another thing that I think also lent The Edge of Sleep to also being turned into a novel is that there's a certain kind of, certainly in the way we did The Edge of Sleep, or do The Edge of Sleep, the audio drama, it's like, it's not exactly, it is a little bit more novelistic than a screenplay would be, you know? And, you know, obviously I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but that's certainly also not what I was trying to do when we wrote The Edge of Sleep, you know? So I think like somewhere, I feel like the magic of like writing a perfect like audio drama play is like in between, like somewhere in between a stage play and a novel, to be perfectly honest with you. At least with The Edge of Sleep, that's what it felt like, because, you know, we also chose to make it a remembrance, which also feels very novelistic a lot of the time. Yeah.
I'd be really curious to know more about what it was like turning an audio play into a novel, you know, because the audio play itself is like very oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like not quite intimate, but it's very personal to like Dave's perspective, you know? And that is sort of in the audio play is balanced with like the other voices you hear and the other characters, you know, so you have a very internal and external type thing. When you were adapting it to text, like was maintaining that sort of like close, like his perspective for parts really important too, or like were there things that you wanted to try to new things you wanted to do in a new medium, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think, to be perfectly honest, we with our co-writer Jason, we're looking to expand on it, you know, because I feel like when you enter a new medium, it's like I feel like you kind of want to like widen your gaze as opposed to like narrowing it. At least that's the approach we took.
Yeah, you know, like obviously it's exciting to build into different mediums, and it's very tantalizing, but we always have to ask ourselves creatively why this should exist. And
right.
you know, just to kind of dive into a little bit of the backstory, which might be TMI, but who cares? It's fun. After the adaptation of The Edge of Sleep, after the podcast came out, we were hired to adapt it for a very short-lived company called Quibi, and so we wrote it for Quibi before Quibi went under, and then we had the opportunity to adapt it into a TV series, which we shot in Kamloops, which is above Vancouver in Canada, which should hopefully be coming out later this year or early 2024. So when it came to adapting the story as a novel, I mean, we were kind of going a little crazy because we've lived with the same story so many times. Now listen, like we've spent many years as writers to appreciate when we're actually working writers. So we're always grateful when we can buy our groceries, pay our bills. But from a creative perspective, we were losing our fucking minds. Pardon the language. Because we lived with the story so many times. But the way we kind of saw Quibi, or the way we always saw the TV series, was ways to maybe almost like rewrites, ways to improve things we feel like we got wrong the first time, ways to pose new characters, questions about the characters that we never thought before. It was almost like interesting redos. And when it came to the book, we really needed a fresh perspective to help. And our co-writer is a writer we really love named Jason Gurley, who wrote a book, Eleanor, that we're big fans of. And just when we started talking to him, you know, having another creative voice is really helped us to have fresh ideas for how we could adapt this as a novel. And as Willie said, for the first time, we were sort of seeing this apocalyptic experience, this pandemic, whatever you'd call it, through the eyes of other characters as well.
One follow-up to that, which is did working with other voices, whether it was your co-writer here or perhaps even Mark and your cast on the podcast, did you learn that, you know, like, did they give you new insights into these characters that you had lived it with for so long, or like, did they change your perspective at all, or?
Every time, constantly. You know, the actors would, you know, like with TV, you're always opening yourself up to more artists, which is more judgment, more criticism, hopefully constructive criticism, hopefully more insight. And you know, the actors would always point out valid ideas about the characters. And so one of the fights that's happening with the Writers Guild right now is it is true, in production, in post-production, you are always writing, constantly rewriting. And so we appreciated the insight from our director, the cast, the producers, who are always great sounding boards, and hopefully helping us just push the ideas to hopefully the best outcome.
So I have to ask, why sleep? Why?
Well,
Yeah, I like sleep very, very much. The whole idea, yeah, Jen's laughing because she knows that, which is in spite of the fact that I'm constantly drinking coffee. Most people would think I don't like sleep, but yeah, I'm curious because when I read the premise of this book, I'm like, oh, that sounds exhausting. I have to read it.
well, I feel like there's a lot of fertile ground for around sleep, right? Like, okay, when we sleep, we're very, very vulnerable, you know, maybe at our most vulnerable. But also when you don't get it, you tend to go a little insane. Like, and you know, I feel like it also lent itself to making the perspectives a little less reliable as the story goes on, because if they're losing their minds and like already you're dealing with kind of like you know, messages that aren't totally clear that are being transmitted through dreams and stuff. So, without giving away too many spoilers or whatever, I don't know. The audio drama is out there. But it's I think a lot more fun to play with your audience when the perspective or the narrator or whatever your window is as the story moves on becomes less and less reliable. So it kind of awakens a lot of questions and interesting things in your brain, you know, as you're interacting with the medium. That was big for me. I mean, I'm also like super into Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Nightmare on Elm Street, you know.
And
so.
you know, in some ways we sort of see The Edge of Sleep as kind of an interpretation of an invasion story. And you know, like we love War of the Worlds. We love the H.G. Wells original novel, the Orson Welles radio play, the Steven Spielberg movie. I think we've seen sort of like the idea of these massive spaceships smacking up Earth over and over and over again. And so it was kind of like, for us, trying to come up with sort of a twist where it's like something very insidious, something so vulnerable, something so simple as depriving people of sleep. And to us, it that scares us.
Yeah, you know, I also think there's something like really, really terrifying about the fact that you can, you know, be invaded in your own mind, you know, like is really scary. Yeah.
It is super scary. And, you know, like Jessica said, I also like, I love sleep, but sleep does not love me. And I have like had trouble sleeping my entire life. And like when I do sleep, I have like a lot of nightmares and night terrors sometimes. I actually like identified with Dave quite you know, intensely sometimes. And I was wondering if you had any experience with that too, because you know, as you were saying, like the way that their sleep deprivation plays into their you know, interpersonal dynamics and their decision making and their perception and all that. Like it felt really realistic, like the sort of like dire, desperate feeling of just like, you know, like trying to do important things when you are exhausted and burnt out and you know, on edge. Like it felt really real.
Yeah, I think, you know, when I was younger, I struggled with a little bit of insomnia, so I kind of know what that felt like. And I also think any writer who's like had to crash a deadline during a production really knows, it's like when you're going on your like second week of only 3 or 4 hours a night and you're jamming horrible sugary foods and like energy drinks to like keep your awake, like to force your hands back to the keyboard or whatever. You feel like you're losing your mind a little bit,
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic.
So because this is not video, I have to just point
Yeah.
out. Now Jen got this for me, or got me into them. These are chocolate covered espresso beans, and they are awesome.
Yeah, I've had them before from Trader Joe's. I wish I had a couple right now. I love them.
Well, yeah, Jake's a little jet lagged, I think. Still, he just
listen. I know what Willie was saying is that like it's true. Like it to get a little like meta, it's like writing The Edge of Sleep. We were on the edge of sleep, so
yeah, exactly.
Art imitated our life at some points.
You had the full immersive experience yourself.
Exactly.
What is it?
Yeah.
Method? Is that method writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you'd call it, method writing. I love that. I'm going to steal that one too. And
just say, like blurb us somewhere. Syosset Library is great.
Yeah.
Okay, I will.
And that's all you got to
sure. A small CC with the library. But
I also think it's a big problem for like a lot of people, like that's why Ambien and all these crazy drugs exist. I mean, I think that drug in particular is too nasty for anyone to even be taking, but like when you're
get political, Will.
Sorry. But like, well, no, I just like know, like, my wife really struggles with sleep. And, when she was taking half of one, she would wake up in the middle of the night, call me or call somebody, have a full-blown fight or conversation with someone, wake up and be like, hey, what's up? And like not remember anything.
The other, like on the flip side, like, because there are elements of The Edge of Sleep that are science fiction, and I think that we love science fiction, and I think that a lot of the time science fiction kind of tries to like answer some of the more like grandiose questions about what exists beyond our world, what exists like beyond like the depths of our solar system and our galaxy, and we kind of like wanted to like raise questions about, sometimes you kind of forget to think about the things that are sort of mysterious in your own life, like what are dreams? What is a dream? Dreams are remarkably mysterious, and there's some sort of psychological answers, there's spiritual answers, but that is something that people really, there isn't one answer for what they are. And so we were trying to look at just sort of things that feel mysterious that exist in everyone's daily lives, and that was kind of interesting to us.
I mean, the other thing to talk about, the other genre, which is horror, is like, not to get too academic about it, but I've always find like, the best horror expresses anxiety already alive in the populace. And being someone who struggles with sleep and being married to someone who struggles with it, that is a massive anxiety, is how much are we going to get? When is it going to happen? And I think anyone who's lied awake at night trying to get to sleep because they have to get up early for a flight or whatever it is, knows the anxiety,
Yeah, that like trying to relax on a really tight time frame so that you can fall asleep is super impossible. And like it creates very interesting stakes for this story too, because like they have to exist in this like very narrow frame where like, because in this world sleeping will kill you, but in our world not sleeping will also eventually kill you.
Yep.
So
it's a fine balance. And I just kind of wanted to throw in something, just kind of what you said before, just really quickly, for me also, like for me, the best horror is something that really does feel tangible, and you really want to, you're okay suspending your disbelief because it really feels grounded. Like when I used to watch, or when I still watch Twilight Zone, the scariest episodes for me are the ones that feel like, that can totally happen. You know, like I'm going to open my door and there's going to be my doppelganger and she's going to mess stuff up, and people aren't, you know, like that one's a little out there, but it feels a little bit more grounded. But, you know, like for me, like my favorite ones are the ones where like people are in a place that seems familiar, but there's just something slightly off. Like those episodes are much scarier in my, for me personally.
Yeah. And I think what I would say, you know, to that is I also, you know, like in addition, like I think that when it is a pretty wild idea, I think it can still really work as long as the characters are grounded. Like it's if you put characters in an extraordinary situation, but they feel ordinary and they feel like they are acting in the way that you would act or someone you know would act, I think that is the sweet spot. Where it all starts to really be very effective.
Yeah, and I think that is true here. Like everybody, like it feels grounded. Like, you know, I sort of like was like, yes, I can see myself reacting in these ways. This was such a fun story, and it's really fun to see it evolve across multiple media, and I look forward to seeing the what it evolves into. Are you working on anything else together, or do you have your own projects, or like what else is on your like writerly horizon?
So
much.
We do everything together.
Yeah. What's interesting is we mostly make our living with screenwriting, but in solidarity with the writer's strike, we're not working with any signatory or struck companies. But you know, like when that will get resolved, and it will get resolved, there's tons of projects that we want to be working on, and you know, we love working in audio. I think that
I just won a Webby.
Ooh,
we did.
Wow.
Yeah.
We did. Thank you. We show ran and directed an audio drama called The Callisto Protocol Helix Station. It starred the iconic and legendary Gwendolyn Christie, who played Brienne of Tarth on Game of Thrones, who is as wonderful in person as she seems to be in all of her characters. And so the Callisto Protocol Helix Station was a show that was released right before the release of a video game called The Callisto Protocol, which was put out by Striking Distance. And we were hired to create a prequel. And it was working with an amazing cast that we loved. Besides Gwendolyn, there was Michael Ironside, who's legendary, and Leland Orser and Sam Plattner and a bunch of wonderful actors. Sam Littlefield. Sam Plattner was the sound designer. And you know, we truly believe that you know, sort of audio can kind of be an outlet like comic books, like where it really like sets the writer free, and it really lets them tell eccentric, personal, artistic stories that could kind of exist on an epic scale. And we think it's a great starting off place for people who want to adapt them into TV shows and movies, as long as the initial nugget of the idea works for audio. And it just gives writers agency over their own work, less development, less involvement from the studio. And
depending on who you're working with.
But I do believe that some of the shows that strike such an amazing core with audiences, whether it's Game of Thrones or The Boys or Walking Dead, would truly be hard to make as much of an impact if they weren't given the freedom to exist as books or as comic books first. It's very rare for a TV show to be, whether a Breaking Bad or Yellow Jackets, to have like the amount of support it needs initially to be so interesting and specific from the get-go. And so we're also, among, you know, TV shows and movies, hope to create a big new slate of audio dramas in the future.
This is so cool. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh my God.
Thank
Thank you
you
for listening to us. I feel like we rambled quite a bit, but thank you for listening to us ramble.
Yeah, you're perfect. That's great. We love this. It was so nice to talk to you. Listeners, I do beg you to pick up The Edge of Sleep. By the time that you hear this, the book will be available. So please go to your favorite independent bookstore or library or wherever you like to go for those things. Thank you so much for joining us. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.